Hi, I'm Dr. Vastaras, and today I would like to address a very important issue, and that is the feedback on the work completed by the students. So, probably the most important function of you as a coach in the X-Culture project now, but also even more importantly, when you will become a manager or a coach to real global virtual teams in the future, it will be providing feedback. So you will be expected to comment on the quality of work of your subordinates and point out what they do well and what they do poorly, and do it in a way that will allow them to first improve their performance in the future, but also will provide the necessary motivation to improve the performance in the future. And I'm sure by now you have all reviewed the training materials on how to give effective feedback. And so that is very useful. But today I would like to focus on the technicalities of how we receive the weekly submissions from the teams and how exactly we will evaluate them, not so much in terms of what number you give or what feedback you provide, what words you say in response to the submission, but rather how to do it in terms of the technicalities, what the file looks like, where you enter your numbers, your feedback, so basically the technical side of it. And so before we get into that, let me give you a little overview of why we do things the way we do things. So as you know, there is a weekly deliverable or weekly submission that all teams have to deliver, to submit. And so those used to be not evaluated, but then for the last couple of years, we've been experimenting with rating them for quality and then ranking them in terms of their relative quality to other teams. And so our studies show that that helps a lot. Students know better where they stand, what they do right, what they do wrong, and how they can improve. Now, the students provide those answers in an online form that we built for them using a very simple, well, not a very simple, but a commonly used survey tool called Qualtrics. And so for them, it looks very neat and clean. So they literally just have questions corresponding to the questions that they see in the challenge, and they would see a window where they just type in the responses. And so the complicating factor here is that we ask every team member to submit the same weekly deliverable. So if there is a team, let's say with 6 or 7 people, there will be 6 or 7 sets of submissions or deliverables from a given team. And other than that, it's very simple. So you see the question in the instructions, you see that same question on the screen of your computer, you provide the answer, presumably based on your work with your team, and presumably an answer that you agreed with your team is the answer for the whole team, so that every team member submits the same answer. What we get is a little messy, and in fact, let me show you what exactly the original submission looks like. So let me go to my screen here, and let me show you what it looks like. So if I had to take the original file, it will be something, doesn't want to open, will look something like this. Very messy, a lot of work because every team has a somewhat different set of questions, and then you have multiple submissions per team. The actual answer will look, or the actual data will look something like this. So thousands of responses and lots of text. And so what we do is we take this text and then transform it in a more readable format. So what we do is we look at every submission by each team member from a given team, and then we would look at the one that is most complete and then keep that one and delete the other ones. And so you, the coaches, will receive only one submission per team already pre-selected by my assistant. But then we had a few choices as to how to evaluate that work. Choice number 1 was the actual interface. So we tried different formats. We tried a format where you would see submission by submission in an online browser. So, and then you would evaluate one, click next, evaluate next one, click next. That didn't work very well because it takes a lot of time. So you have to go next, next, next. And it's, when you have many teams and many questions, it becomes kind of slow. In addition, when you want to provide feedback, it takes a long time to type it each time into the window. And I'll tell you in a minute what we use now that allows you to speed up that process. Then we tried also a system where we would put all those submissions in a Microsoft Word format. So we would take the submissions that we receive in Excel and we put them in Word. And Word allows you to present that material somewhat more elegantly, I guess you can say. But it's very inconvenient to enter the evaluations in a Word table. First, Word is notoriously bad with big tables. And if you have literally 1,000 teams and sometimes multiple questions, you end up with a table that has 1,000 rows and multiple columns. And that's when Word becomes very, very slow. Second, some submissions break across the page. And again, scrolling up and down becomes a little inconvenient. And third, if you have multiple questions from the same team, just not enough space on the page to put all those columns there. So if it's like only 1 or 2 columns plus the team number and the company name, that is still manageable. But if there are like 3 questions in a given week, you just cannot put it all on the same page, or your columns become so narrow and so long that it's not very convenient to work with it. Plus, again, you would need to type in the feedback each time separately. And so eventually, after much testing, and so we had a number of focus groups of coaches last semester, and we had a number of focus groups with our graduate students, including one that we literally did last week with 8 professors, where we sat down in the room and tried different formats to see which one is the most convenient. Eventually, we decided that the best way to go is in Excel. And so here is what the file will look like when you will receive it from, well, in your case, from the program director, for coaches, coach coordinator. So it will look something like this. It will be an Excel file, and you may not get the whole thing of it, but only one page within the file. But it will basically look like this. It will be an Excel file with a separate page for each of the teams, each of the companies. And so for the sake of illustration, let's look today at the submissions done for the team, for the company called Sakona. And so you will have here, so in the early track, we have 16 teams that chose this particular company. And so they all submitted their work. And so every week, the teams would submit a progressively more complete set of answers. So the project has only started, and the first set of submissions were what we call the initial brainstorming. So the teams were asked to look at all of the questions and literally brainstorm them, not go into any details, but simply give their initial general ideas. Like, for example, if the question is, what would be the weaknesses of the company? Just brainstorm it and write whatever comes to mind first. Or, for example, what is the best, most promising market? Just, give us your ideas. So the answers so far are very short, and in most cases, it's just a few words or maybe a couple of sentences. Next week, the teams will be asked to work on the same questions, but provide more detailed answers. So they will be asked to now, not only give the initial ideas, but give us the actual best answers they think they will be developing. And so they will be probably equally short, but a little bit more thought of. And then next week, they will be asked to give us a little bit more complete answers. So it will be all main points that they would like to include in the final report. And then a week later, it would be main points with some explanations, and then main points with more detailed explanations. Then finally, they will have to have a more or less finished complete draft. And then finally, at the end of the project, they will submit the final complete report. And so when we look at Sakona, it means that every week the students will be basically answering the same set of questions. But each time it will be more and more details. And so for Sakona, the questions this time are these, and you can see them in the challenge instructions, and you should have access to them already, and if not, you will have it basically today. And so here, for every company, you will see a set of, a description of the company first, but then in addition, after the description of the company, you will see the actual questions that the company wants you to answer. And so, they will include things like, let me go here. So do some introduction and then do the competition analysis, right? Competitive position of the company, and then select the market, and then new market entry mode and stuff like that. And so you can read in detail as to what the students need to answer. In fact, not only will you see here a description of what the students need to answer. Sorry, I opened their own file. Sakona is here. So the challenge. So not only will you see the actual questions, right, but you will see some details and even some guidelines as to where students can go to receive more information on how to answer those questions. So read them very carefully before you do any evaluations, so you know exactly what the questions are, as well as how they should be answered. And then there is even one thing here that you may be very interested in, and that's the evaluation rubrics. So here we even have a set of criteria that the instructors will use at the end of the project to evaluate the quality of the final reports. Now, for the weekly submissions, these rubrics may not always be applicable, because during the weekly submissions or during the project, the students may not have a complete answer. And so you have to kind of expect them to be as close as possible to the final report. But you should recognize that in weeks 1, 2, 3, those answers will be not complete. So they will be only initial answers. And so therefore you cannot expect them to have all the details and all the arguments there. And so these are the questions for Sakona. So you have here industry and competition analysis. And so what that is, basically analyze the company's strengths and weaknesses compared to the competition, as well as maybe identify the potential threats and opportunities for the company in this particular market or industry. Then select a market and analyze it. And so here, that's where the students will select a country or maybe a region where they believe the company has the best potential. So that's where there is most demand and there will be greatest sales. And then analyze that market for its cultural environment, economic environment, political environment, maybe some sort of trade restrictions. So whatever you think the company needs to know in order to be able to succeed in that market. Then decide on the market entry mode and distribution channels. So will the company be present there as an exporter? So basically nobody on the ground, they just ship the product and sell it there. Or maybe there is a need for some sort of a joint venture, or maybe some sort of a franchising arrangement, or maybe a wholly owned subsidiary, or maybe some local sales representatives. So whatever you think or the teams think should be the form of presence in that market, entry in that market. Then logistics and trade regulations. Sakona happens to have fairly large, bulky products that will be used by many customers in like gaming centers and malls. And so in some countries, there may be some regulations or certification requirements for those kinds of products, as well as shipping those products may be a challenge. It's not something that you can just put in an envelope and mail to a different country. So there may be some options, do you ship them by boat, by rail, by air? Which one is safer, cheaper? Those kinds of things. Pricing and service support. Again, how much should that product cost in a country that we are talking about? As well as what kind of pricing strategy should be chosen. Should it be a fixed price? Should it be some sort of a financing plan? Or maybe some sort of discounts if you buy multiple products, or maybe discounts for repeat customers, those kinds of things. And likewise, support. So it's a product that can break at some point. So should the price include technical support? Should it be included extra? Should there be some sort of a warranty plan that the buyers need to pay for? Those kinds of things. And then promotion and marketing. So in that market, how would you market that product? How would you sell it? How would you, what would be the message? So basically, how would you promote it and market it? And so same thing, evaluations. One thing that I missed, and that's something that most companies want, when we do the industry analysis, not only do we usually ask the teams to analyze how this particular company compares to the competition, but in many cases, the companies also ask to conduct a little survey of potential clients. So they literally would say, like Sakona, for example, big 5D gaming stations. They would be in malls, as I said, maybe in gaming centers, in entertainment centers. And so the students are encouraged to literally go and talk to the directors, managers of those kinds of centers and interview them and say, or ask them, do you currently use any of those 5D gaming stations? How did you select them? How did you decide to buy this particular brand and not a different one? What would it take you to switch from whatever you use now to, for example, a Sakona brand? What's the reasonable price for you? What kind of expectations do you have in terms of service support and stuff like that. And so there would be a set of questions for most of the products, most of the challenges. And so again, we don't really require that all team members go and conduct a survey, but we encourage them to do it. And so if they do it, they will collect some useful data. It will allow them to better understand how their potential customers think, and that hopefully will allow them to create better market entry and marketing plans. And so those are the questions, and those questions will appear in your file with, in a form of an Excel file with a separate column for each of the questions and a separate row for each of the teams. And so here we have, as you see, 16 teams. And so it was the very first week, so some of them don't really have any answers. So for example, the survey of the stakeholders and analysis of the industry. As you see, some of the teams didn't even do it yet, and that's fine, that's perfectly fine. And then you have the SWOT analysis, so strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and you have those answers. And then the markets they suggest, and then the entry mode they suggest, and then partners they perhaps identified as potential partners who can be retailers or buyers or maybe franchisees for the company. And then logistics, we talked about that, and the price point, how much should it cost? And then the price structure, and then promotion channels. Would you advertise it on TV or maybe via newspapers, or maybe some professional groups, things like that, and marketing strategy. And then in most cases, companies also have what we call the ultimate challenge or ultimate test of the proposal viability. So what most companies say is, all right, so you believe that we should try to sell our product, let's say, in the United States. And you believe that we should use, I don't know, for example, exporting to sell it there. And you believe there is enough demand there to justify our presence in that market. Why don't you prove to us that that is really the case? Why don't you actually try to find a client for us in that market who is willing to buy our product and bring us that contract? And if you do, we will give you some money. We will literally pay you an aftermarket commission. So in the case of Sakona, for example, they offer 15% of the first shipment. So they say, if you will sell basically for us one of those products, once we get paid, you will get 15% of that contract value. And so for many students, that's a very strong motivator. You can make a lot of money. Some of those products are fairly expensive. But more importantly, it's also an opportunity to actually really test if your product, if your idea has some viability. If really there is a demand for it, if really there are people there or companies that are willing to buy that product. And again, many teams will not attempt it. So many teams will think, oh, that's too much work. I don't want to talk to anyone, see if they want to sell the product. But some teams do, and some teams literally would go, like in Sakona's case, to a local mall and say, talk to the mall manager, would you consider buying one of those gaming machines and putting it for your customers? And if not, why not? If yes, would you consider Sakona? We have this wonderful company. Would you take a look at them? So anyway, those are the answers. Now, one of the challenges with Excel, and we are fully aware of that, is that some of the answers may be too long for the cell to be displayed. If I did this, and you can obviously do it on your Excel, so if I kind of make it a little bit bigger and then go to format cells and alignment and wrap text, here is what happens. Oops, not like this. I think I need to do it like this. See, now you can see the whole answer. And so this week, the answers are fairly short. So for you, it's relatively easy to see the whole answer in the question. Over time, as the teams will provide more and more text, sometimes there will be too much text to be displayed in one cell. So there may be much more text here. And so, yes, in Excel, sometimes what you'll need to do, either make the column wider so you can see the whole answer, or what I personally do something like this. And this way you see the whole answer here in text format. And if it's too big, you get this little scroller on the side, and you can just scroll up and down and see the whole answer. So yes, that's one of the inconveniences of Excel that we are aware of. At the same time, Excel gives you a wonderful opportunity to see multiple submissions. Just scroll like this and you see the whole thing. You can also go indefinitely to the left or to the right. So you got multiple questions. You can just go next, next, next. You're not limited to one page as it would be in Word, or if you were doing it in the online form, right? And so the best advantage of Excel is that it's very easy to provide feedback. Excel kind of remembers what you said before. And let's say, for example, for this particular team, your feedback is excellent work. I especially like your, I don't know, examples and references. However, your pricing strategy is not clearly explained. And you probably will say more, once you read those answers, you will have more comments, but see what happens here. So once you press enter, right, you move to the next column. And so this kind of stays in the memory. So the feedback that you provided kind of stays in the memory. And imagine that you have next team that has an equal submission or similar submission, and you want to say the same things. Once you start typing excellent, like once you put that letter X or E, EX, it remembers the whole thing. And so you don't have to type it again, you just put enter, and you got your feedback. So that makes it very easy to enter feedback, even though it's lengthy. You don't have to copy and paste, you don't have to type it again. In Excel, it's very easy to do so. When I did it in trials, what I did was I would actually have multiple columns for feedback. Like I would talk a little bit on, for example, clarity, and then a little bit on the references, like references are good. And then I would talk maybe a little bit on the length. I feel your answer is too short, right? And so I would have those separate comments, and let's say the second team also had something with the references, and I feel, so you have that. But then it's very easy to what we call concatenate those answers. So you don't have to do it if you're not very comfortable with Excel. But if you want to learn something new, this is what you do. You put the symbol equals, and you start typing concatenate. So once you put concat, you have this, kind of help here from Excel, and you say concatenate, so you choose that function, and you just select all three columns. You close the parentheses, and see what it does? It just puts the whole thing. Why did it not do it? Let me try to do it again. Concatenate this one, and this one. Yeah, so see, it kind of merged all of those together, and so now you have one very long answer, all of those combined, and then you can copy it. So right-click, copy, and just put that feedback in one common column as values, and so you have this very long combined feedback right there. So everything is there, right? So so that allows you to do much more than just simply, I think I missed one of the columns, like this. So you highlight all of the columns, enter, you have your combined feedback, and then you can always just copy it here. If you don't want to do that, it's perfectly fine. You can just type whatever you want in one column. It's just one of the tricks that you might want to learn if you want to master Excel for the future. Now, so that so far so good. So you just read the answers, right? And you provide some feedback. But there is also the column that we call ranking. And again, this is something that we experimented with and tried different approaches, different scales for ranking, and eventually decided to go with literally what we call ranking and not rating. And let me explain the difference. Rating, that's when you evaluate quality in absolute terms. For example, if you have a scale from 1 to 5, 5 could be excellent, 4 could be good, 3 could be okay, 2 could be bad, and 1 can be very bad, right? And so you look at the answer, and if you think that this answer here provided by team 6 is excellent, you just put 5, right? And then if you think it's good, you put 4, and so on and so on and so on. The problem with this approach in our tests is that it's almost impossible to judge what is good and what is bad objectively. There are really no right and wrong answers to most of these questions. It's not 2 plus 2, where 4 is the correct answer, it's an excellent answer, and 5 is a bad answer, it's poor answer, it's 1 basically, right? So it's not good. Here, you never know. I mean, yes, sometimes some of the answers may be, very short, very basically empty. In that case, you know that it's a 1, so it's bad. But in most cases, it's almost impossible to say what is good and what is bad, right? So it's impossible to judge what is excellent and what is merely good and what is okay. So instead of evaluating the quality in absolute terms, instead of rating the quality, we rank the quality. So we rate the quality in relation to other submissions. Now, when you have a company that is popular and that is represented by, let's say, or evaluated or that has 30, 40, 50 teams working on this challenge, it may be very difficult to rank them from 1 to 50, you know, like this is team number 1, this is team number 2, and so on and so on and so on. But it is possible to rank them in terms of kind of general groups. And so we use a 5-point scale where 3 is about average. So 3 is about average, right? So kind of similar to other work. So about average, right? And that's going to be your most popular grade that you will give. So most teams will get 3 about average. So probably about 40%, maybe 50% of your teams will get 3. So they're all the same, roughly the same. So we can say that it's about 40% of all of the teams will get 3. Now, some teams will be better than average. So after you read 10, 20, 30 submissions, you see, oh, this is actually better than most. And so that's your 4. So better than most. And so you will probably have about 20% or so of the teams that will fall into this category. So you see something that is better than most, we give them 4. Some will be excellent. So some will be like way, way better than most. And so that's your 5. So that's way better than most. You'll probably have only about 10% of the companies in that category. And the same goes for 2 and 1. So your 2 is worse than most, right? So it's not bad, but it's kind of weaker than most, right? And so that's, again, about 20% will fall into this category. And then finally 1, that's way, way, like it's very, very weak, much weaker than most. And so this will be roughly 10% here. And so this way, you don't really have to judge if the answer is good or bad per se. All you have to do is judge whether it's better or worse than most that you see in your submission. In fact, we even allow 6 and we even allow 0 for some special cases. Like occasionally you will have such a good submission that it looks like it's, you know, like very professional, as if it was prepared by a professional consultant. And you may have like 1, maybe 2 of those in a given week. So don't give more than 1 or 2 6s, like let's say 1% only. So if you see something that is super impressive, you are even allowed to give them a 6. So we can call that the pro level, okay? And then when we have a 0, that's when, you know, there is no submission. So sometimes you will have a team that literally didn't say anything, like there is almost nothing. I don't think you will see those ever or often, but if you see it sometimes, you are allowed to give a 0, like that's literally nothing. So they didn't submit anything, so you can give them nothing. And so this approach, our experiments show, and as I said, we tested all kinds of different models. This one was eventually selected as the most efficient, informative, and equally high quality as the other ones. So this approach will allow you to give reasonably objective ratings or rankings without having to be, you know, like to judge the absolute quality of the work. So when you look at the submissions, you will see right away that some of them are much better than others. Like, for example, this particular team, you know, has answers for all of the questions. Well, actually it doesn't for some, so I suppose it's probably going to be more or less average. But let's see if we can right away see something that is much weaker than average. Like, for example, let's look at the first submission. So they have purely as the amount of the text. So they have a nice review of the strength of the company and the weaknesses. And I see a lot of text here. And they have a good list of countries that potentially could become, you know, the markets. They have 3 entry modes that they considered. Looks good to me. They have several potential partners identified. Looks good to me too. Some transportation options. It looks like they looked at everything. They have some pricing options and price structure that they discussed. Not bad at all. They looked at a number of promo channels. In fact, they have quite a few here, so it looks very good. Didn't really do anything in terms of the market. And they thought about testing their proposal viability in terms of, you know, trying to get a contract, but haven't done much so far. So we got some idea, but let's take at the next one. So these guys say that the survey of stakeholders is not even applicable, which is not true, because I think that is requested by the client. So you should be alerted right away. They still see a good list of strengths and weaknesses, but it's much shorter than the one provided by the first company. So if I had to say that this one is average, then the first one is probably a little bit better. They don't have a very lengthy list of potential markets, which not necessarily is a bad thing, but because they had to generate as many options as possible this week, I would say it's probably weaker. Entry mode, again, they looked only at 2, and I'm not sure if licensing is even a good one because the company makes their own products. I don't think they want to license them, so I'm having some doubts. Partners, they have 1, but again, not even sure if promotion exhibitions is a good option here because it's not a partner, it's a vehicle for promotion. So, have some questions. Truck train, not sure if it's a good idea given that the company is in India and the companies they propose is Japan, countries they propose is Japan and United Arab Emirates, and the United States. Trucks and trains don't go there, right? And air is probably going to be too expensive. So again, I have some doubts about that. Pricing, I don't know, so we can argue about that, but they have something, not much though, and so on and so on. So clearly the second one is weaker than the first one. And then when I look at the third one, it seems to be very good. So it seems to be as good as the first one. I see lots of countries and good list of strengths and weaknesses. And I would read them more carefully to see what's there. But just by simply looking at that, I see that the third one is a stronger one than the second one, and probably as strong as the first one. So once I look through a few of those, I will probably know that 11 or Team 11 is probably about average from what I see. And these guys seem to be, or probably the first and the third one are about average. But the second one is probably below average, so I'd give them a 2, right? And then when I look at the fourth one, so let's see what we have here. So they have something here, a very low short list here, a little bit of the markets, not bad. A good list of potential entry modes. They didn't think about the partners yet. They didn't think about logistics yet. They focused on the distribution, the price point, but didn't say much yet. Pricing structure, interesting stuff I'm reading. Yeah, that is interesting, yeah. Promo channels, a good list. Yeah, I like the exhibitions. Local social media, good ideas, and quite a lengthy list. Marketing something here, yeah. So that seems about average. So if we assume that 1 and 3 and now 4 are about average, they should get roughly the same score. 2 was definitely, or Team 11 was definitely weaker, so we'll give them a 2. And you just move like that. And sometimes you may have to adjust your scores, like as you read more, you will see that actually, no, average seems to be a little bit better. So maybe you'll go up and, adjust some of the numbers. But that's how you do it. And so, yes, I will not be able to say that this is an excellent answer. Like Team, for example, 6. I like it, but it's hard for me to say that it's excellent or poor. But by looking at multiple submissions, I can say, yeah, it's about average or maybe slightly above average. And so that is the number I can defend. And so this is your scale that you will use, and these are your numbers that you will give. So most of your teams will get 3, but some will get 2, some will get 4, some may even get 5 or 1, and maybe even 6 and 0, right? And then you provide some feedback. With the feedback, as I said, you want to be as detailed as possible. I strongly encourage you to be, comprehensive and talk about things. That's where the most value for teams is. Our experiments show that it does help for them to know how they compare it to other teams, if they do well or not, if they should, crank it up a little bit, or maybe, they're doing fine so they don't have to worry too much. But the actual feedback, that's where they learn most, and especially, what is bad, what can be improved, how they can do it better. So try to spend as much time as possible on this. And as I said, most of the problems you will see and most of the deficiencies you will see, as well as most of the good things you will see, will be kind of similar. So there will be probably 3-4 negatives that you will always have to comment on, and there will be probably 3-4 positives that you will always have to comment on. And the beauty of Excel is once you type it up once, if you try to type it again, it will automatically use that same text. So you don't really have to, type it again. But if you want to type it up in a separate file, like in Microsoft Word, so that your grammar is checked and everything, and just copy and paste from there, you can do it that way. And so once you're done, you just fill out those, yellow columns, and the program director will tell you which teams you have to evaluate. And you will probably spend, I'd like to say, maybe 2-3 minutes per submission. So if you have, like, let's say 20-30 teams to evaluate or 40 teams to evaluate, it shouldn't probably take you more than 2 hours a week or something like that total. And so, yeah, once you're done, we'll just consolidate your answers, and we will try to have 2 sets of evaluations for each team, or maybe even 3 sets of evaluations for each team. So that way, the average that you will give will probably be very informative. And yeah, once you submit your work, you will send it to us, and we will consolidate it. And and then we'll share it with the teams. And so this way, you will see and learn how to write reports. You will see what kind of errors people make, and you will see what kind of challenges they experience, and you will see how they can be improved. And so that's an excellent exercise for you, because as a manager, as a coach in the future, you will have to do it over and over again. And so this will be a great opportunity for you to learn. But then at the same time, the information you will provide to the teams will help them, and they will be able to do a better job and then please the customers more, and then hopefully learn something new. And so that will be your kind of business side of your practical phase. There will be a separate whole block of work that you'll need to do around the human side. So the business side, that's where you look at what they write as teams and provide feedback and comments and rankings and ratings. But also you will from time to time be assigned a case where a team has a conflict or a challenge, or maybe a case of bullying or a case of sexual harassment. And so that's where you will have to intervene as a kind of shrink, I guess, in a sense, and try to help them with their human-related problems. It's a whole different story. I'll talk about that some other time. But for now, that's what we'll do. And so if everything goes fine, the reports, the weekly deliverables, are due on Sunday midnight, New York time, and we will download them usually Monday morning. And then it will take us a few hours to clean up the file and send it to Tim, who will then distribute them to you. And in most cases, you will be always evaluating submissions for the same company. So this way, if you do Sakona, you'll always do Sakona, and you will learn more about that company. You'll learn more what a good answer looks like. So that will hopefully create some consistency. Or if somebody does for CER, for example, it will be for CER. And you will be just told, please evaluate these 10, 20, 30, 40 submissions. It will be fewer first, because we only have the early track now, and it's a smaller track. So there are not many teams there so far. But then in 3 weeks, the late track starts. And so that's where we will have like 600 teams. And so there will be 600 submissions each week. So that will probably mean that you will have about 30 or so submissions to evaluate every week, provide your feedback. And then, yes, once you provide your feedback, so you will have about a week or so to do it. Once you submit your feedback, we will consolidate it and send it to students next week. And then the students will evaluate the quality of your feedback. So for us, we want to know how well you can do it. So in the end, when we will give you the recommendation letter, when you will get your evaluations, we'll basically ask the students, so do you think this coach was providing useful feedback, something that you can learn from, something that is respectful, developmental? And so this way you will also get some feedback. And we'll try to share that with you more regularly, so that you know a week later how your feedback was perceived last week. So this way students learn from you, but you learn from students. In their case, they'll learn from you how to write a good business plan. You learn from them how to be a good coach, a good manager. And everybody wins in the end. All right, thank you so much. And I think Tim will give you probably more information and guidelines as to what exactly needs to be done. And then we'll have probably one, maybe more webinars on how to do it effectively. So, but yeah, eventually you will become comfortable with that. And eventually you will learn how to do it quickly, efficiently, and objectively and effectively, right? So thank you so much. And hopefully we'll talk sometime soon.